What is bridge content and how to use it? Hey, I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. Here's a unique place where you can help your clients make the most of their publicity. It's kind of a public relations strategy as well as a copywriting uh, technique. But when your customers get interviewed as an expert, when they're mentioned positively in the media, or sometimes even negatively, a piece of bridge content connects one audience to a message. It highlights the original coverage of the topic, and so you can borrow from the reporter's perspective, but that also highlights your value in the context. Why did the reporter come to you to interview you? And what other value can you provide to the audience that wasn't mentioned in the original content? So let's say you're mentioned in a feature article, and I've used it before. So I was in 1985 or something like that. There, I was interviewed as a Boy Scout at a conference, and that was my first media exposure. And I was in the Washington Post. I've used that as why media is important, and referenced that article. It gives credibility. It lends a long term perspective to understanding how media works. My interaction with the reporter. It can demonstrate the things I didn't know then, but I know now. But I don't have to repeat the whole story. And I don't want my prospect to go to the newsletter archives and find the old story. I need to reference it as a credible source in the piece that I have now, but then use this content to transition the credibility that was gained in the media. So I had a business development client that was had we basically set this up. We invited the governor to his location. The governor couldn't show up, but the governor's staff showed up. We highlighted that story with a reporter. And then when the reporter published the story, we referenced the story as having the ear of the governor in the sense that the governor sent somebody over to learn about this company. That's why this company is so important. The public relationship aspect is that we set up the media engagement, and we would have loved to have the governor. We managed to get district senators and congressional people down and other things. But if the governor would have shown up, that would have been much nicer. I worked with another company where we did get the governor to show up. But long story short, that credible media mention, highlighting that, and then in the context of your message, providing a deep dive into an offer. So, hey, you may have it could be an email newsletter that says, hey, you may have noticed that we were featured in XYZ publication. Here's why we were featured there, and here's some of the things that we couldn't cover that would be beneficial to you. And if you want more information on this topic or you want to schedule an appointment, then here's how you do it. So it's a bridge between the prospects where they are and the media coverage that you had. And the bridge has an exit right off the bridge, which is all not off the side of the bridge, but off the bridge, which is to get more information. So you're setting up a path for your reader to learn more about what you do by getting a special report, for example, or scheduling an appointment, or they can go and read the original article, which always sets them up to come back to you because the article uh, presents you in a credible way. Now, the bridge content calls out the specific prospect. So your media coverage, for example, may just generally mention like two lines about who you are, and they might mention five or six other people. We don't want to send your prospects to that page to see other people like your competitors. See, a good balanced news article is going to talk to three or four people. We don't want to send people to three or four of your competitors. So you write a short excerpt, bullet points, whatever you think is going to help that visitor get the gist of the article without reading the article. And then at the end of that article, you have a specific evidence driven lead opportunity. What do I mean by evidence driven? Well, it's evidence that you are a credible expert because this media professional has called you out. Reference the article, mention the media professional, echo any positive coverage. Then you are going to add value add. Hey, the article didn't have a chance to go over these three important points, 1, 2, and 3, and that's why these points matter to you. Again, call out the audience. The media coverage could have been general. Now you're going to speak specifically to your audience. And then if you'd like more information on this topic, if you'd like a special report I did on this, then click this link. Do you see what we're doing here? We're not just pointing out that you got media coverage. A lot of my clients, they want to go through on the public relations side, and they're just delighted that the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal or some publication has mentioned their name. I've been mentioned in a number of books, resources from people who are just, I look up to them and I'm mentioned in their book or publication. I buy a couple copies of it, I give it out to people, but I don't expect them to read the whole book. So I write, again, bridge content that takes the prospect from where they are towards where they want to be through the credible reference, which is kind of an endorsement. And then, of course, I want them to raise their hand to identify themselves as someone who is interested in this topic, who can benefit from this topic. Now, this bridge content should not be as long as the original article. So if the original article where you're covered is 2,500 words, you're going to look for something about half that, maybe even 400 words. The content that you write on your blog post could be summarized for a LinkedIn post. It could be summarized for an article. And then you can point back to your actual feature article because maybe the reporter didn't cover the topic in enough depth. And so maybe they had a couple tips, and you've got, they mentioned 3 tips, but you've got 27 tips. And so you mentioned 3 more in your content, but then offer somebody the 27. Do you see where we're coming from here? Again, you don't want it to be a bridge to nowhere. The bridge, on the other side of the bridge, the customer can see where they want to be through the solution that you offer, and they can pay a toll by opting into your list and getting additional information that helps them get across that bridge faster. They can schedule an appointment. So sometimes you can say, hey, we were just covered in the Wall Street Journal, and here's some of the details of the article. And you don't really provide details, you provide bullet points. And if you'd like to discuss this specific in your organization, then contact us to schedule an appointment. And then you give them instructions. You might find out that the news coverage was unfavorable. So you might be concerned about that. A lot of my clients in the past have had favorable and unfavorable media coverage, and they kick into action. So maybe they got a regulatory fine, and they kick into action about acknowledging the fine and the old leadership that caused the fine and what they've done to solve the problem. But they definitely don't want to send somebody to the original article, especially an expose, because then the customer is going to see all the bad things that are happening, and they're not going to have the media control that you'll gain by, again, writing a piece of bridge content. Now, bridge content can bring together a number of mentions in the marketplace. So it could be kind of a portfolio. Let's say we work together and we got you publicity in 2 or 3 trade publications. You can write bridge content for each of the publications, or you really want to focus on the context of the article because it's not as important what the publication was as the context as it's relevant to your audience. But you can also do an end of the year summary of all the media coverage that you've gained and why it's so important that these people are talking about this topic, because that topic benefits the reader itself. Now, in your own media, you can call out people specifically. In a platform like LinkedIn, Facebook, assuming your audiences are there, you can call them out by saying, for example, executives need to know these 5 things, and that's why Fortune magazine asked me about such and such. And then you can bullet point what was in the article, include a link to the article because you want to tell the search engines that these are contextually relevant information. And then the search engines are going to see your name in the article, it's going to see your name as the author, and it's going to build your credibility when it comes to the search engine itself. And then towards the end of the article, you want to start making that transition. This topic is important because of these benefits that you will receive, but you got to take action. One of the ways you can start taking action today is to get a copy of my free report. Now, in my program, Establishing Instant Credibility, which is now available as a book, you can visit the website at www.jwhco.com. Go to the shop. You'll see the book, Establishing Instant Credibility. I use special reports because we want to take the prospect out of the mainstream media into your own private media into a seat where they're sitting down and making a decision to take the next step. Now, if you got a physical book in front of them or a printed report or a binder, there's a lot of different physical mediums that you can use. Even a DVD program that they put in the DVD and sit on their couch and watch the presentation, you're now taking them out of the distractions that are these other forms of media. And that's why bridge content references in a credible way the media coverage you got in another channel, but doesn't encourage the person to go visit that channel because that channel's got advertising, it's got other content. The person is going to forget why they even went there. So again, bridge content is short and sweet, focused and to the point. It helps the individual get key ideas and concepts without reading the whole big article where you're mentioned. It positions you as a credible expert. Now, not alongside other people, but as a credible expert. If they read the article, they'll see that you're alongside other people. But it positions you as a credible expert, yet provides additional context and information for the reader so that they can learn more about the topic. It's stepping them from prospect to inquiry. Once they inquire, then you can follow up in a sales funnel to specifically serve their needs with the product or service. But again, these bridges, you can make them one after another. I don't know how many times I've mentioned media coverage for my clients. So sometimes we'll get a good piece of media coverage for a client, and then we'll write 5 or 10 bridge articles that reference the same credibility. In fact, we'll even go get a reprint from the newspaper. So we get a local media coverage, for example. We'll get a reprint from the newspaper and put it in the lobby of the business. And then we'll interview the owner of the business with all these media coverage in picture frames behind the guy we're interviewing, the gal we're interviewing. And we might even have them in a conference room. One client of mine, we had copies of all media coverage on the wall of the lobby, as well as pictures with customers. And I talk about that in another program. In their conference room, in a binder out front in the lobby, but also something that salespeople carried along with them. It was kind of a marketing swipe of media coverage. Most of the media coverage that we would deliver in a sales kit would just simply be like the first page. It was not a full reprint because in the sales materials or the materials that we're warming up a prospect with, we would reference that media as proof, as evidence that this company is out there doing things and getting results. We would even go as far as that when that company, because remember, most of my clients are consultants, coaches, service professionals. When a client had a success story, we would do the same thing. And with the client's permission, we would do a bridge content or we would wrap around the media coverage, which is called a newscaster method. We'd wrap around that content to then interview the client and further show the value. And the best thing that could ever happen is for a client interview, we're doing a little case study, is for them to mention that they first saw us in Forbes magazine or they first saw us in the local tech magazine. And a lot of times you can get coverage on non-traditional media. So you can get coverage in your local tech magazine. You can get coverage in your local newspapers or local websites. You can get even negative coverage and turn it around. You don't want to strive for negative coverage. But on one of my channels, I actually had a neighbor who wanted to file criminal charges against me because my grass was different. My landscaping was different. I was actually using a natural landscaping method. I was recovering the soil from a forestry activity, and the neighbor was basically trying to get me arrested because my yard didn't look the way he expected it. And so that negative coverage was even used as a point that the majority of people don't understand what environmentally friendly is and how their own yard mirrors that in which they are against. And so again, the bridge is that simple. It's the gist of the article. It's highlighting the original coverage as a credible means of recognition for you. That's why awards work so well. It identifies your value in the context of both the audience and the coverage. It makes some kind of offer. Again, we don't want them to read the original article. If they do, that's great. They can do that on their own time. But while we have their attention, they're at the toll booth on the bridge. They're going to pay the toll, which is opting into your list, where then you're going to give them more information. Once you have their email address or their phone number or they've scheduled an appointment, then you can just they can read all these articles because they've already committed to start interacting with you. But again, remember a lot of these articles, when it's good media coverage, it's going to tend to cover 2 or 3 different people. Now, the reason I know this works is experience, but even more important, the newspapers and publications do this so that you'll promote their content. Okay? When I interview clients for case studies, I interview 2 or 3 clients. I don't do it as much as I used to, but I would take a couple clients, interview them, talk about all the public things that we can talk about, and then I would promote them. Because obviously, the more successful they are, the more they attribute that success to what we do, especially when they're hiring me for public relations and copywriting and sales funnels and marketing strategy. And then it just compounds in value. But that compounding in value, I turn around and use it to show how what I do is valuable and how to for the prospect to get started. Again, bridge content is extremely valuable. Never just point to the content where you've been successful. You can do that at first because social media is easy. And if you get media coverage, you could do a 3 to 5 social media posts pointing to the original coverage. But then the bridge content is what generates the lead. Nobody is going to go read a Wall Street Journal article and then come back to your website, look for an opt in form, and then opt in for that same topic. It ain't going to happen. However, a piece of bridge content that is either on social media, it's on another website, it could be on your own blog, it could be on your email list with the criteria that we've established here, gives that person an opportunity to raise their hand and say, wow, you're the person I want to talk to. You're the recognized expert. Give me your special report. Let's schedule an appointment. Let's move to the next step. I now understand that you're the right person to work with. Do you see how this works? Do you see how this leverages what the newspapers and media already wants, which is your reference to them, but builds credibility for you because you're borrowing the credibility from the publication? And then now when you start doing press releases, public relations, and everything else, this is a multiplier for that value. You could have somebody on your team that just does this. Now, as a copywriter or marketer, you could have somebody just on your team that does just this. And so it's a very valuable source to your clients to amplify any positive media coverage. It can also be used to mitigate negative coverage, but it's considered a bridge. You can write feature link content someplace else, but this is just a quick bridge to connect the credibility of the publication with you as a valuable player, provide a little bit different additional detail that contextualizes the content to a specific audience, and then generates a lead. It could even just be an opt-in page. Anyway, I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. Bridge content is a valuable way to connect your prospects with your credibility using other people's content and generating leads for your website. If you want more tips, strategies, and insights to be more productive as a copywriter, to generate more clients, and then ultimately the techniques to use words that sell, then go to www.adbriefings.co.uk. Join our free newsletter if you like, or ask questions on the contact page. This has been the Ad Briefings Copywriting Tips podcast, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you soon.